Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Get More Students podcast. I'm your co-host, Alex Asher, CEO of LearnCube.
And I'm Herbert Gerzer, founder of digital advertising agency herbertgerzer.com.
And what's our topic today, Herbert?
Well, a very exciting topic, how student recruitment has changed for language schools. No doubt, a lot of things have changed in the world over the past year and a half. And certainly student recruitment has changed for the language training industry.
That's right. Certainly on the LearnCube front, since, I guess our niche is language schools and tutoring companies, we've seen a lot of online and physical language schools switch online or do more online. And so with those changes, we've had a lot of questions. And actually, when we started with Herbert, you and I talking about marketing, a lot of the questions we had were from physical language schools going, hey, how do I go about student recruitment? This whole thing is changing and I don't know how to go about it.
Absolutely. And I mean, at the ad agency in March, April 2020, obviously there was a significant shift in how language schools facilitated their courses. That transition to online also meant that a lot of language schools didn't know how and where to market their courses and what marketing channels to use. So, it was a very busy time last year, helping language schools take advantage of some online platforms to promote their online courses.
And fortunately, today we're going to be talking about it, but not just you and I. We have a very special guest with us by the name of Sooh Park. He's the Director of Marketing and Recruitment at the English School of Canada, based in Toronto. So thanks for joining us, Sooh.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Herbert, for having me on.
Yeah. Now, Sooh is also not a newbie, but again, just like all of us, we're all learning during this kind of crazy year. But Sooh's actually been in the language training industry for over 20 years. So it's really observed a lot of changes in, demographics and best practices, and, the market's been changing constantly. So it's great to have somebody with your experience, Sooh.
Thank you. I'll try to share as much as my knowledge as possible.
Well, Herbert, I mean, a great place to start is, helping us kind of create some context and some contrast. What did student recruitment really look like pre-COVID, pre-March 2020?
Right. I mean, when we're talking about language schools, and I think especially for ELT or English language training schools, from my experience, a lot of their students came through agencies. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sooh.
That's pretty much sums up our activity and everything and anything that our partner agencies had done in the past was something repetitive year after year. Yeah, so that pretty much sums up.
Yeah, it seemed like a channel that was, up to that point had worked really well, but it was a very dependent channel, right? Because, when I was in New Zealand and Australia, particularly in Australia, it was definitely sort of 80 to 90% of business was coming through that agency channel. Is that how it was in Canada as well, Sooh, from your perspective?
Yeah, so Canada is very similar to Australian market, probably a couple of years behind. But pre-COVID, my employment at English of Canada since 2003, our industry in Canada hasn't really evolved much. And I think it was one overdue in terms of the way we recruit students. And we see that from students, and changes are slowly starting to happen. Markets are becoming more informative. The information that we have had and shared wasn't being so unique in terms of sharing that information about who we are as a school and what we do being in Toronto and Canada. Because I think in the last 20 years, Canada has profited and benefited a lot from having international students, and a lot of them have gone back and shared their information with their friends and relatives. So market was becoming very informative, and but we're still doing very similar and same way for the last 20 years. Going to different countries for 3 times a year to meet the students through fairs, working with the clothes agencies, etc., etc.
Yeah, so sort of summarizing, it was very agency focused. You were having to actually go to these agency fairs where either you would meet agents or you would meet students as part of kind of supporting directly those agents that were working on your behalf. And did you notice many people really experimenting at direct marketing, before COVID started?
Yeah. So the digital marketing has emerged into Language Canada, which is an organization that advocates on behalf of language sector in Canada, public and private, for, I guess, last 5 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. But I think for schools to make, in some way, a bold decision to pivot toward the digital marketing, it would have been a gutsy move because 80 to 90% of your main bread and butter are heavily depending on agencies. So even though we have wanted for language school to spend, a chunk of cash towards R&D for developing digital strategy, was something that everybody knew that it's coming, but at the same time wasn't the move that everybody was ready to make.
And I guess there wasn't that pressure to change or adapt or to innovate back then because you had such a stable business with and revenue stream from the agents.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, even in my, even with LearnCube, looking at our own marketing channels, you're often kind of trying to improve often the things that are working. And so if agents were working, I guess what you're also saying is it was hard to see the same return. Like I could put $1,000 now worth more into some agents, or I could put $1,000 into Facebook, but the return on those agents at that particular time was it much higher, or was it just more as a safer investment, like you knew what the return was?
I think that's pretty much where language schools were standing, Alex. That's exactly what it was. You do 2-3 fairs with close partner agencies, and they set the venue to recruit students, and the X number of students translates into dollar. There was more, conspicuous forecast from a lot of language schools. So that is basically no brainer.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, if I go to one more fair, then I get X number more students. And so there was a real correlation, or at least it felt quite a safe forecast, is what I think you're hearing.
Yeah, Alex, that's an interesting point, because I think just before COVID, though, when I look at 2017, 18, 19, the market some of the markets we have dealt with, have become really informative. I'll give you, for instance, markets like South Korea or Taiwan. They have become a very informative market. There's a less dependency on agencies per se in terms of students in their countries getting the information. However, they'll be going through agencies to get the visa process done, for instance. Other related activities or services will be one of the main reasons why students have been going to see the agencies. But in terms of information, some of the markets that we have depended on a lot in the past have become really informative. And when I say informative, it's where the people in the markets are able to assess information in hand. But still, when I say agent activity is quite vivid, that would definitely mean markets such as Latin America or Brazil, where the market activity is still depending on in-person, going to see the agents. Parents need to see the person who actually talk about the schools and the country, and who actually had experience sending students abroad. We had a lot of markets other than South Korea or Japan or Taiwan that depended on in-person counseling. So I think the COVID really was an agent that accelerated the whole change of the process of students need to now go out there and finding the information on their own without having to depend on going to the agency because of the COVID.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And yeah, I mean, having the prospective students now kind of with more power, that means schools need to be very aware of their whole complete online presence, website, social media, etc. I'm sure that was also a big topic for you, Sue.
That's for sure. And I think moving forward, Herbert, I frankly don't know how many of us in our ELT business in Canada will continue to have online part of our business accelerate further, or are we eventually moving back to where we were pre-COVID-19? That's a good question. Of course, time will tell. But schools like us who have worked with you, Herbert, for last 17 months and know the potentials of what we can actually achieve through online, having the strong online presence. It will probably be hard to completely depend back on agencies or solely on in-person recruitment style.
What do you think that percentage mix looks like for you, Sue? Or even if you just want to talk more generally from what you've talked with colleagues and that kind of thing, like if it was 80 to 90% agency driven before COVID, what do you feel that the current mix is now? And then what do you feel it's kind of heading towards?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Alex. So for us, pre-COVID-19, I don't even know if we actually had a digital presence, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%.
I would rather say direct inquiries.
Yeah.
There are some agents, it doesn't really matter which country it is, but there are some students who actually have fundamental doubts about going through, doing the processing through the third person, that they like to have everything in control. These are, in the tourism industry, what we call allocentric people who actually like to have everything under their own control because they think they can do this, and they can process their visa themselves by applying through Canadian embassy, etc. But this is very small percentage of the market. Our market depends on the mid-century, where about 45 to anywhere between 45 to 60% of people who have some knowledge, but still depending on the third person, like an agency. So we had some direct registrations, but monthly basis, the revenue will be less than 2%, 3 to 2%. Obviously, wow. The revenue was much bigger because we based our tuition on in-person studies, so it was higher. But then still, it was a small pigment of what we make per month. During COVID, though, and now, through the campaign, through Herbert, has really helped us a lot. And now the direct registration has gone up to about, in some months, about 25%, which is huge. At the same time, I would say the number is underestimated because some of the campaigns we've done through Herbert are actually, some of the students are going to the agencies with the information that they got from us through direct communication.
Yeah, right. So there's almost like an aspect of both direct inquiries, but also informing, basically through, an extra touch point, I guess, what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're up to about 25%. And then I guess the question would be, where do you think that's heading? Do we feel like it's going to start bouncing back and going back towards a more kind of agent-driven model? Or, I mean, even 25%, well, I think is a staggering growth, is still a heavy reliance on agents at 75% of the mix. Is that what I'm hearing, Sue?
Yeah. But once again, this is very anecdotal experience from my end. A lot of schools may not go back to the digital marketing or digital channel to obtain certain portion of their revenue in the future. They're more ready to go back and do the in-person and pre-COVID style marketing. Some may, and many schools may. But, our school, at any given point, we have about 500 students pre-COVID. So we're not classified as a big school, but I would say more like a medium, sort of in between medium and big size school.
Yeah.
The challenge with a school like us, need to have constant adaptability, and we have to be very, very super sensitive with the competitors emerging to the program that we have first built because it was very unique and niche market. So when the other competitors come in, we need to be able to create different product and be able to exit out of the conventional product and create a new product. So that timing has always been very sensitive for schools about our size. So, to add my point previously about digital recruitment, this will, for us at least, stay in the future as important channel of recruiting students, at least from what I can see.
Herbert, while we have exposure to it, we're only more exposed to it at the kind of school and kind of conversation level at LearnCube, but you would probably have a much higher, kind of what the budgets are that kind of people are coming with and what percentage that might be of their overall marketing. What's your take on this?
Right. I mean, every school is different, right? And has kind of different priorities and sees the future differently. But at least the clients that we work with have kind of doubled down on that digital marketing strategy and see it as the foreseeable future, and really want to build out their overall online presence, their website, social media, and keep on reaching new markets and new audiences through online campaigns. I still know of some schools out there that haven't maybe taken it as a priority to get online quickly and to maybe market their online courses. I assume that they're hoping that things will go back to normal and that people will come for in-person courses via agents again.
Yeah. What is Canada receiving students in person now, I believe, Sooh?
Yeah, so we have been, even through the pandemic. So there's very specific type of people that could have entered during the pandemic. Those are what we classify as essential workers. So essential workers are people who work in farming in the needed regions. And even international students have actually hold a study permit are considered as essential traveler. So those students have been coming. I wouldn't say a lot, since we were able to open the school physically and accept students for in-person classes. It hasn't started for long. Right now, we have about little less than 24 students in the school. But these students are the ones who actually went through our rigid 14-day quarantine, government mandated process, being in the hotel for 14 days. And obviously it adds extremely a lot of financial burden on students because that 14-day stay at the government designated hotel costs somewhere around $2,500 to $3,000 just for the 14 days. So it really dissuaded a lot of students who wanted to come. But now we are slowly opening up our border, as you might hear. As of August 7th, our neighbor in the south, who have been fully vaccinated, are traveled to come to Canada, not on essential purpose, but non-essential purpose. So if they're fully vaccinated with the 4 vaccines that are approved by Health Canada, they could come here and completely bypass the whole quarantine process. And as of September 7th, we're opening up our border further to the countries that actually have a visa waiver system set up with Canada, and through ETA, electronic travel authorization. which is the system that links the citizen's passport to our system for 5 years, and just like $7-10 to set that up. And those are the countries that actually have, once again, visa waivers set up. Those countries that are in the EU and some countries in Far East countries, Far East like Korea, Japan, Taiwan, they could stay up to 6 months if only they are fully vaccinated with the vaccines that are approved by Canada, so they can come. And so numbers are growing slowly, and we are opening up further. And obviously that has relevance to percentage of fully vaccinated residents in Canada. And the province that we live in, Ontario, we have 80%, 81% of first shot fully vaccinated, and 75% of fully vaccinated rate. So it's pretty high.
Yeah. I guess what's interesting about that is it's still, maybe it matches a little bit like the UK, like from my anecdotal kind of conversations, a lot of physical schools here are seeing like 10% of their original student recruitment. And I don't think we've seen a sudden bounce back, even with some minor openings, because there's still quite a lot of disruption. So the big question for me, in a way, is that while encouraging, those numbers are still huge differences from what was before the pandemic. And so I guess where I'm sort of wanting to, and interested in both of your opinions, is if in-person doesn't magically go back to where it was, there's still kind of a need to kind of push on the online side of things, I guess, to be able to keep things going. Well, what are your opinions on the way things are moving and how quickly they are?
Yeah, so Alex, there hasn't been magic for us for the last 19 months.
Yeah.
It has been feeling like walking to doctor's office and you hear a bad news kind of thing. So there hasn't been some magic solution. No, you're absolutely right. And I think if UK is having 10% of students coming back compared to the number that they had pre-COVID-19, that's a good number. Our number is nowhere close to that. We probably have somewhere mere 5%.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. The countries that we heavily depend on in Canada, as you may know, and same in Australia and UK too, China has a very important card. They have their own vaccines, and a lot of citizens in China have been vaccinated. Canada, unfortunately, have not recognized their vaccines, Sinopharm and Sinovac. So there's no study done in terms of booster shot with the different vaccines, whether it's going to be effective, whether it's going to be okay for those students that actually have been vaccinated with 2 vaccines that are recognized in China. So that question still remains. And I don't think we're close to seeing anywhere close to what we have had pre-COVID-19. More so for that reason, working and emphasizing on digital recruitment is going to be important strategy for us for next while.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And I assume also because of these restrictions that also changes the target audiences and markets that previously might not have been on your radar to reach out to new potential students.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Herbert. So I think what we have benefited the most from the digital campaign that was held by Herbert is seeing waking up to a dormant market. That market existed, so we didn't create that market. It's a market where people never had intention to travel. That market was something that we're never interested in, unless you actually open a shop in different countries and have your own ELT system set up in Brazil or Korea. It's not a market that we have been interested, because I think we're good. Things were in general pre-COVID-19. We were okay. Revenue-wise, bottom line-wise, everything was okay. So that change wasn't really necessary. With the digital campaign, we have woken up to a dormant market that we have never realized it existed. And I would say, little less than half of the customers and students that we have recruited in the past, a lot of them have no intention to physically travel to anywhere because they're professionals. They are getting paid good. Their jobs are less impacted by COVID. Their wage has not been impacted. So yeah, and those market is something that we are keenly eyeing on moving on forward.
Also, those are quite different, almost products in a way, right? So one was, it seemed like the majority of physical language schools, certainly Australia, and I think Canada has similar things. They have requirements on how many hours a student would have to do per week in order to kind of achieve a certain kind of level of status, with like particularly going into like higher education and those sorts of things. But that's quite a different product to, for example, helping professionals who are not going to spend 6 hours a day in a classroom. They only want a certain number of hours per week. So it's quite a different product and a different value proposition, a different price point. Yeah. Everything about that is quite different. Have you noticed that change for you, Sooh?
No, obviously, Alex. I think to add to your point, there's really subcategories of what you just have mentioned. Even within ESL learners who have been conventionally taking programs in person or even online, there are a lot of subcategories, and I think the ESL industry itself has been evolving, as you know, and there's a lot of shift from our end as an institution, private language school. We focus a lot on ESP, English for specific purposes. There are a lot of professionals that are out there whose English isn't bad, who don't have confidence though, to be able to connect with their suppliers and buyers in different countries, in different time zones, where they're forced to speak English as a common language, but they just don't have that much of confidence. For those people, even within the category of people you just described, Alex, there's a strong shift of people wanting to learn the language through the field of expertise and specialization that they're involved, where their more intrinsic learning is involved. So we see that change happening quite rapidly.
Interesting. That also would change even the teachers you recruit, and I mean everything kind of changes with the product change, right?
That's for sure. I mean, and so far we have to follow Languages Canada criteria of who we hire in terms of having certain level of education. Plus, in Canada we have TESOL Canada, which is certification process for teachers to be able to teach in designated learning institution. On top of that, schools like us, we're looking for some overseas experience. How long is it? Where did they teach? Et cetera, et cetera. But with ESP, English for specific purposes, obviously we're looking for people with different backgrounds, and it usually comes with more older age group of experienced teachers who had profession in engineering, or we have some teachers that used to be RN, registered nurse, who have gone on to the ELT sector, and we were really looking for that type of specialized experience previously before they coming into ELT industry.
Right. Yeah, I mean, thanks so much for your insights, Sooh. It's great to hear some input from the ground, from someone in a language school, especially a previously physical language school, and how they've made that transition over the past 1.5 years. And I think everyone is asking themselves, when is it going to return to normal? And it probably won't return to normal. But what does the future look like for the industry, especially language travel schools? Is the digital product, the online course, is still going to be a huge part of the mix?
Yeah, so we have a term in our language industry, and our executive director of Language Canada can't say it better. We have a saying, building a plane as you're flying. So I think we're still at that stage where we're just rolling with the punches at this point. A lot of schools that I know are waiting for that recovery of the normalcy that we used to have pre-COVID-19. when nobody has an answer. I think it's really depending on individual schools' structure, whether they're going to continue with the digital strategy and how long. But strictly looking at from where I stand, waiting for that normalcy will not be restored in the next while. And we're prepared to move forward with the a digital campaign as we have been, and even after some level of normalcy is restored, we have now known that there is untapped market that's out there. So we're continuing to plow through this channel through a digital campaign for sure.
Great. Herbert, any ideas on where you see things going?
Yeah, I mean, innovation. I mean, that was kind of one of the first words back in March, April. Oh, language schools need to innovate now and not just offer the same language programs that they were offering in person online. But what that looks like. There are so many different ways to innovate. Whether or not it is the method of facilitating the online programs or the teaching style, or maybe implementing some technology, virtual reality, artificial intelligence. There are so many different ideas out there, and I guess only time will tell which of those play out, and the investment, both time and monetary, what provides the best return on investment.
I think one of the questions I have that may be helpful as well is what won't change from now? Because if you know what won't change, then investing in that makes a lot of sense, right? So, for example, if what won't change is students will, a certain proportion or a certain demographic of students still want to learn online, then that won't change regardless of when things go back. But it seems like at the moment, otherwise the alternative is just to wait for things, an environment that you have no control over. So I'm kind of curious about that question, what won't change, and therefore what could language schools do that will benefit them regardless of what the future holds?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Alex. And I asked that myself. I asked that question myself too. I think this answer, I have to defer a little later. I think I need to see what reemerges back into the market to see what hasn't changed. Things are pretty dormant, and I can see that now Canada slowly opening its door. The Asians that had little or less or no activities are now slowly emerging back. I mean, that's a part of sign that, they downsized during the COVID, and now they're emerging back into the recruitment scene. So I think for next while, the presence of agencies and the dependency that went with it from a lot of language schools will still be there. But once again, I think this is something that we need to see 6 months later, 7 months later, when things are, when normalcies is restored. We'll see, this hasn't really changed. So it's a little early to tell, to be honest. But we're just going to have to see a little bit longer.
Makes sense. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Sooh. It's been really great to have you. I've definitely learned a lot. Today we've gone through what student recruitment looked like before COVID. We've looked at what it looks like now, and hopefully given you some ideas on what it could look like in the future. But for today, we really hope that we've delivered our promise, which is to continue to provide ideas, inspiration, and motivation on marketing for language schools and tutoring businesses. And anything else you want to add to it, Herbert?
No, thank you again, Sooh, for your insights. I hope that's helped any language schools out there. And see you in the next one.
Definitely. So make sure you hit that subscribe now button and see us on the next week of the Get More Students podcast. And we'll see you again. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.